Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just going to give folks a moment or two to enter the space, and then we'll get started. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Welcome, everyone. We're just waiting a moment to let everybody come into the Zoom space. It means so much that you're sharing your evening with us to learn about this exhibition. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Kat Redness, and I am the Public Programs Educator at Shelburne Museum. And I am absolutely just thrilled to be here with you all and here with my colleagues tonight. Katie just hopped on, Katie Wood Kirchhoff, just a dream colleague to exist and collaborate with. We are also joined by Isa, who you most likely won't see. Isa is behind the scenes and has done so much tech work for this, and we are so thrilled and grateful for all they've done to make this happen. We are here to explore Varied and Alive and to take a closer look at it. The webinar will be about an hour, and we will save a good portion of the time at the end for question and answer. But at any point during this, if you need a clarification, if you have a comment, feel free to put that in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that the whole time, and we'll make sure that we get to those thoughts and have them answered as much as possible. Just a couple quick things for you to know. We are using Q&A instead of the chat function. So if you'd like to ask something or make a comment, you can do that in the Q&A. Somebody's already, hello, Bridget! Bridget's here. Bridget does another webinar with us, so we're so thrilled to have you here, Bridget. So there's a Q&A that you can ask questions and put comments in. And then also, if you'd like captions for this, please feel free to put those on. You can put those on. They should be on the bottom bar. If they're not, you can do more with the three dots, and captions should be there as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Katie Wood Kirchhoff, a dear friend, colleague, and just altogether brilliant mind. And I'm so thrilled for us all to learn from Katie tonight and hear more about this phenomenal exhibition that is coming up this season. Katie, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for that gracious introduction, Kat. And hello, everyone who is tuning in with us. I have to tell you, of all of the webinars that I get to do, I am so excited about this group of materials tonight. Over the course of about 45 minutes before the Q&A, I'm hoping that I will start off by sharing a little bit about the upcoming exhibition, Varied and Alive, New and Rarely Seen Treasures from the Collection, that I am co-curating with my fabulous colleague, Corey Rogers. So I'll give you a short introduction to the exhibition for the first section of the webinar tonight, and then we are going to turn to a group of items that I am just over the moon that we get to share with people this season and next season. They are our bed rugs. And for some of you out there who are like, what are bed rugs? You're going to learn all about them tonight. This is the first time in my 10 years at the museum that we've been able to exhibit these items, and there are a variety of things that had to come together to make that happen. But in the spirit of close looking, there are going to be some sections of tonight's webinar that were pre-recorded, where I get to talk with my other fabulous colleague, Awen Riley Bird, who's a textile conservator. And we are going to make an effort to share with you all the materiality and the kind of real sense of weight and heft and texture of what a bed rug is. And then we'll have time for some questions at the end. So with no further ado, let's see if my computer will catch up with me. Hang on. We'll try that. All right. So this is an image that was taken in 1992 by photographer Ken Burris of the Dutton House attic. Now, the exhibition that we are putting together is going to be held in the Pizzagalley Center for Art and Education. We've been installing it for several weeks now, and it's looking good so far. But it was this picture that Corey and I used as a kind of inspiration when thinking about what we wanted to share and what we might want the installation to kind of evoke. As you all know, if you've had the pleasure of visiting our museum, we have more than 100,000 objects scattered across 45 acres with 39, soon to be 40, buildings and structures. And we are known as a collection of collections. And in this attic, you see some of those items that don't fall into traditional categories that are at many museums. So, for instance, you see a couple of cradles, you see a hobby horse in the foreground, there's a sleigh, there are some other sort of pull carts in the background, and you get this idea of lots of different kind of items that are maybe part of our regular everyday domestic sphere. That's one of the things that Electra really aimed to collect when she put together this institution. And the exhibition, Buried and Alive, through 5 sections, really explores many of the pieces of that collection that have not been exhibited for some time. It also features some new acquisitions. So, one of the things that Shelburne Museum is known for is our collection of American folk art. And one of the big categories that our museum founder was attracted to was that of weather vanes. And here are two of the most iconic weather vanes in our permanent collection. The weather vane on the left was made by L.W. Cushing and Sons. It's of a clipper ship, and it was manufactured probably between about 1870 and 1920. The weather vane on the right is a locomotive with a sunburst, and that was by an unidentified maker, somewhere probably in the third quarter of the 19th century. And these two objects speak to both our folk art collections and to one of the formative stories of Shelburne Museum, that being our collection of items that are related to transportation. So we're really excited to have these up. We also, this item is a new acquisition for us. So this is a toy train that was made by Frank Tilton. This is a fairly recent acquisition that my colleague Corey has brought on. And it's a fabulous magical item in person. So it's hard to get a sense of scale here, but this toy train is actually large enough for a small child to climb on top of and ride. And Frank Tilton moved to Vermont when he had been a paint salesman in Ohio. He moved to Thetford and he started making toys for his grandchildren. They became so popular that he eventually had a business where he did this. And so we have items like this that speak to sort of whimsy and our toy collections, but also those transportation collections and some of the forces, technological and otherwise, that really shaped Vermont as it grew during the 19th and 20th centuries. So, other items in this collection that are shown in the exhibition, one of them is this large rocking chair. We call it our Boston rocker. It is dated 1849 and it was originally displayed outside a chair factory in Morrisville, Vermont. The photo on the left is of Electra Havemeyer Webb sitting in a regular sized rocking chair, and her friend, the actress Zazu Pitts, sitting in the Boston rocker to her side. And you get an idea of just how big this rocking chair is. I also love that Zazu is holding a giant fork in this. It makes me think of Lily Tomlin in her giant chair eating peanut butter and pickle sandwiches. We have this lovely chair, which was in fact a trade sign. It was meant to advertise a business. We also have this sign, which you can't really tell from this picture, but you do see a cord extending from the side of the image. This is a mortar and pestle trade sign that would have been used outside of a chemist or an apothecary during the 19th century. And if you can believe it, this whole thing illuminates from the inside. So we'll have it illuminated in the exhibition. It is super cool, if I do say so myself. We also have a whole section on wildlife. So some of you may recognize this image. This is an image of a swan that was included, a common American swan that was included in John James Audubon's early ornithology of American birds. So As many of you who have visited here know, we have quite a collection of items related to birds of all kinds of feathers. And so over the run of this exhibition for the next 2 years, we'll be switching out some of these Audubon prints. They were known as elephant folios because they were printed on very, very large paper. And they are as impressive in person as you might imagine, full of life. One of the things that I love about these is their sort of environmental details that were carved by many engravers who are not even listed sort of in the credits, but they are just fascinating items to behold. Also in wildlife are two of our most famous felines here at the museum. On the left, the big white kitty on the red tuffet is Tinkle. It is marked on the back of this painting that this picture was painted in 1883. And as my colleague Corey will tell you, it is probably the most famous feline at Shelburne Museum. It has been used in advertisements and in filming for various TV shows. So Tinkle is a fan favorite, as you might say. And on the right is Tinkle's sort of compatriot in crime. So when we acquired the painting that is on the right of the black and white cat with that lovely vermilion collar, the cat didn't have a name. And Electra and her early colleagues started naming objects that came into the collection that were really compelling, but that didn't necessarily have titles associated with them. And the title that this picture got was Many from the Outskirts of the Village. So we know that this painting of so-called Minnie was painted in 1876. Some of you might be able to see the mark of the maker in the lower left-hand corner, R.P. Thrall, as well as the date. And these two cats together, I will say, as a dog person, we have a lot of cats in this exhibition, but I think you're going to like them. I know I do. Um, Moving on from wildlife, we have a whole section dedicated to interior lives. As the curator who works on a lot of our furniture and on our textiles, I get really excited about this section because we get to investigate many kinds of domestic furnishings that might be familiar to people who have lived with any items in a home at any point in their life. So this picture may look like just a view into an interior. It, in fact, is a miniature. So this is known as a thorn room. It was made by Narcissa Niblack Thorne between 1930 and 1966. Miss Thorne was a Chicago native, and she made many of these interiors that are sort of lit from above. You may have seen some at the Art Institute of Chicago. They have a huge collection of them. But this one will be displayed in the exhibition. It's a fairly new acquisition. And it is extraordinary the level of detail that you see in these pictures. Not only of the pictures on the wall, but everything down to like this little cocktail set that is right in front of this wingback chair, or the set of paints and the picture that are sort of in process right over here. Really, I love this item. In Interior Lives, we also have a couple examples of textiles from our vast collection. Many of you may know that we have quite a quilt collection, almost 700 bed covers in total. And the image on the screen that you see here on the right is an overall view. On the left is a detail. This is a quilt that was made by Florence Peto. And if that name is familiar to you, it may be because Florence Peto was one of the earliest social historians who worked on American quilt history. She was a collector. She collected finished, pieced, and appliqued quilts. She also collected yardage that was historic. And so this pattern that she made, the Calico Garden, she finished this in 1951. So she made it in the 50s, but it was made with historic fabric. So many of you sitting at home, if you have fabric stashes, you may be like, well, of course she did. What else would she make her quilt from? But I really love when you look at the detail on the left, you can see her really precise fussy cutting with some of the pieced blocks, as well as her applique details that just everything is just perfectly tied up with a little bow. So this quilt will be up for a while. We also have a bed rug that we're going to be sharing with you. And this is the first of three clips that we're going to share. I am going to go ahead and hit play to give an introduction to this, and I will see you all in just a few minutes. Hi, I'm here today in the Colgate Gallery at the Pizzagalli Center for Art and Education with our textile conservator, Awen Riley-Bird. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Mary Comstock's bed rug, and specifically we're going to talk about the materiality of this item. Shelburne Museum has a fairly large collection of bed rugs. We have 8 in the collection, and over the run of this exhibition, we're going to actually be showing 3 of those items. So, Awen, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what you see when you look at this item.
Sure. I think the design really stands out for a few reasons. One is that there's a name included at the top of the bed rug.
Yes.
And you do see that on some bed rugs, but it's always nice when a textile has a name attached, because then it carries that story too.
That's true. And Mary Comstock was actually from Shelburne. So she was local. This rug was found in a house on the grounds that are now Shelburne Farms. And so it really has this sort of hyper-specific, hyper-local relevance for our institution.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So another element of the design that stands out is the scale of the flower and urn design. It is larger than you see on most bed rugs. And so it really pops out and has this strong graphic quality that I think is exciting, even to, in terms of contemporary design and things you see out in the world today. It's really, it pops out.
Yeah, so the design is you're right, it's very unique. When we think about bed rugs and we think about sort of the arc of their development and use, when they were made, the earliest bed rugs in North America were made or dated to the 1720s, and the latest ones date to about the 1830s. So this was made in 1810. It's dated 1810. So this is on the sort of later end of the spectrum. This really large sort of urn with a floral motif coming out of it is comparatively large to others that we'll see in the presentation tonight, but also when we look at comparatives, usually there's more of a sort of pattern. It's not just this big sort of superstar flower in the middle. So those are all big design choices. I think a lot about Mannerist design with this. So it's almost symmetrical, but it's not quite, right?
Yes, and that is another thing that really stands out to me, is how playful this design is. So there's a clear plan overall. It's very symmetrical. It's laid out nicely. But when you start to compare the two halves, you see all these sort of playful differences, right? So you see these polka dots on this side, whereas you get these sort of lobes and triangular shapes over here. And then on the bottom, when you look at the large flowers, in many bed rugs, there's a very strict adherence to symmetry. So you would have petals and stems that are exactly the same shape. And here, these flowers, they're relatives. They're coming from the same plant, but they have their own unique identity. And I think it's just so lovely. The more time you spend with this bed rug, the more you enjoy it.
Absolutely. But there's something sort of interesting that our viewers may have noticed. And I want to talk a little bit about the ground material this was made with.
Sure.
So if you look closely at the bed rug at the surface, you'll notice that there are areas of the pile that are a little bit abraded or sort of worn down. And beneath those, you see this really lovely, I'm going to call it a diamond twill pattern. Yeah. But it's in browns and creams and blues. And you see that in some areas like this. And Awen, as someone who knows more about textiles than I do, can we talk a little bit about how that ground material works, sort of how it functions as part of this larger textile?
Absolutely. So you've brought up a really interesting element of this specific bed rug, which is the condition. So you do see the surface pile sort of worn away in parts to reveal that ground fabric underneath. And so here you're actually seeing the construction layers of the bed rug. So bed rugs were made generally on a woolen fabric. And then you can almost think of it as an overscale embroidery or needlework. So you take wool thread though through the wool ground fabric, and you can lay down stitches that are flat, or oftentimes you take a stitch and leave extra length before putting it back down through the fabric, and you create a big loop. And that loop becomes the pile, that fluffy stuff that sits up from the ground fabric. And so here, some of that pile is worn away and we're seeing the ground fabric. And what is spectacular about this ground fabric is that there's actually a plaid pattern you can see as well. So you get the diamond twill pattern, but you get these lines of blue and white intersecting. And I think that's really cool because when this was made, you would not have seen the ground fabric, when this was completed.
Right.
So there must have been a reason. Like that was a specific choice to choose that.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're laying out an image like this and this beautiful lettering,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Right?
spectacular
It's
lettering.
iconic. It's so
Yes,
great.
this is icon behavior. Thank you, Mary. So when you're laying out an image like this, imagine, having a grid pattern can be really helpful.
But it makes me think a lot about women's education, right? In early America, if you were sent away to school or if you had a private tutor, part of learning to write involved practicing in items called copybooks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there would be sort of lines when many of us learned our script, or when we learned to write as younger kids. We learned on lines, and that almost works like ruled paper in this.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
The other thing that really, I mean, while we're talking about Mary's signature here, what really strikes me about this is the really lovely, almost lightweight lyricism of her letters. It's really alliterative too, right? But the fact that this is so light and really airy, you get a real sense of her hand moving over this.
Yes.
It's really
And I think that brings up another interesting sort of material technique as well, because across this rug, you do see that pile, and then sometimes those pile loops are left in place, and sometimes those pile loops are cut, and it becomes, then the yarn sticks straight out and becomes sort of fluffier and lighter, and they take up space in a different way. And so here, when we're looking at this lettering, most of the lettering is cut pile, while the darker brown around it is the loop.
Oh.
And so you're getting contrast in texture, and you're getting this really nice, lightweight, sort of airy quality with that lettering.
Hi. Hey everyone, coming back. Hi. Okay, so now that we've had a little material introduction to Mary Comstock's bed rug, I wanted to show an image of the overall rug so you get a whole sense of what that item is. And for the next little bit, I'm going to share a little bit of information about where this tradition came from, right? Before I started studying textile history, I'd never heard of bed rugs. It's not an item that we generally use today anymore. And so I want to share a little bit about where this tradition came from, what inspired it, and then I want to talk a little bit about its geographic specificity here in New England. So these two images that you see on the screen are items in the Metropolitan Museum's collection. On the left, this item over here, the sort of more creamy and brown palampour. This is an 18th century Indian painted and printed palampour or bedspread from Madras. And so this item, if you were able to look at it closely, you would notice that it uses both block prints and hand painting to create this beautiful sort of exuberant tree of life design. This is one of those items, the longer you look at it, the more details come through. On the right, the sort of bright yellow bedspread that you see is an 18th century Chinese palimpor that is made with silk embroidery that was manufactured either for the European or the American trade. So what we're looking at here are two examples of textiles that are part of a global web of influence and commerce and design history. And I wanted to show you both of these because the designs that we see on the bedrugs that will follow, this is really where they were rooted, no pun intended. So there are these two items. There's another tradition too, and that's the tradition of turkey work, tufting, and embroidery. So these two 18th century chairs, 18th or maybe late 17th century chairs, are both in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum. Um, while they may look like your grandma's needle-pointed chairs to you, these are actually extraordinarily rare survivals. So the upholstery that you see on the backs and the seats of these two side chairs it's called turkey work embroidery. And this turkey work was an imported material, or it was made at home uh, to approximate Middle Eastern rugs or Asian rugs or these sort of textiles that were coming from the Far East. So both of these chairs have sort of roots in coastal New England, probably Boston. And we know that because of their woods. We know that they have woods that are native to North America. But this particular kind of textile upholstery was just, it would have been the fanciest thing that you had in your home at the time. It would have been incredibly expensive to acquire because the materials, the wools, the dyes, all of those kinds of things cost a lot of money. We can talk another time about how important a kind of financial component textiles are in the home, but these two chairs are important for understanding the bedrugs that would come later. So this is a bed rug that was made in 1722. It is the earliest known example of this form that we have anywhere. This is at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. Big shout out to my colleague Whitney Van Dyke who helped me get this image. And I wanted to share this because you can see a number of design characteristics start to emerge. So it's dated 1722. We know who made it. It was made by a woman named Mary Avery of North Andover, Massachusetts. And this is just packed with really lovely woolen yarns. So you can also see at the bottom, so you see this M and this A for Mary Avery, the date 1722 for when this was likely completed. And these two sort of cutouts in the bottom, some of you may know, are for the posts of a poster bed. So something to keep in mind when we look at these items moving forward. This next example is from Colonial Williamsburg. This was a bed rug that descended in the Bown and Draper families of Long Island, New York. And so I bring this up because I want to share sort of that relationship between these kinds of bed rugs and those palimpors that I just showed you that were from India and China. There are a lot of similarities in terms of this foliate design. This bed rug is from the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. It's in the Bayou Bend collection. This was completed in 1782 by Jerusha Foote Johnson. And we know this partly because of these two little eyes up here. Some of you who know a lot about alphabets may know that in the 18th century, J's were not a separate letter. And so often names like Jerusha Johnson get monogrammed as II. So this is from 1782, and I really love this bed rug because it's another way to think about sort of design. You see that whole sort of tree of life motif coming up here. It's very stylized, but this also would have used indigo dyes, and indigo is a whole other conversation, but you're going to see blue and white items show up over and over again today. Another blue and white cover from Colonial Williamsburg. This one's dated a little bit later from 1785. But I would argue that this almost looks like it has a sort of flame stitch exterior. Again, it's using those really lovely blue dyes to create almost an ombre effect with some of these geometric designs. So now we're getting into some bed rugs. This is, let's see, this one is in, sorry about that. This one is in Colonial Williamsburg's collection, and it is from New London County, Connecticut. I should mention too, some of you out there may have seen Lynn Bassett's fabulous exhibition back in 2022 at the Flo Grizz Museum called New London County Quilts and Bed Covers, 1750 to 1825. I bring that up because many of the coverlets I'm going to show you tonight, the bed rugs, have this distinctive design. You see it over and over again. And you might wonder, why do they all look the same? I would argue, and Lynn does as well, that these were evidence of these sort of textile traditions that were emerging in the Connecticut River Valley. And ultimately, they were traveling north up the Connecticut River Valley, just like the settlers who eventually came to Vermont to make homes. If you know a little bit about Vermont history, you know that our state was once just portions of New Hampshire and New York that were then cleaved to create Vermont in the very center. And that Connecticut River Valley runs right down. It was a huge settlement route for all kinds of folks who were moving up with growing families and all kinds of things. So there's this wonderful rug from New London or Norwich, Connecticut. This is another one. This is different, believe it or not. This is at the Art Institute in Chicago. This is also from New London, Connecticut. This bed rug is at the Art Institute, I'm sorry, is at the Met Museum. This is our bed rug. This is going to be up for the second half of 2026. This one is from Hartford, Connecticut, so also right near the Great River. This item is from the American Folk Art Museum. Again, you're getting this idea of these big sort of almost thistle-like flowers with this little central urn with these really wonderful lyrical borders. This item, interestingly, was from Littleton, New Hampshire, which if you know the geography, you know is not far from St. Johnsbury, New York. So way up the valley, but definitely related in terms of a kind of design history and connection. This rug is also from the American Folk Art Museum's collection, and it's from Jericho, Vermont. So we're getting a little closer to Burlington. We're heading west, and you notice that the design has started to depart, right? This was made in 1806, and we know that it was one of the members of the Packard family. There are two Packard bed rugs that are related, and this is one of them. And so you see that design starting to change just a little bit. Keep in mind, this would have been made 4 years before Mary Comstock's rug that we looked at in the video was dated. So here's the Comstock rug again. This is 1810. And then I'm just going to show you this one more. This may be difficult to see on your screen. It's hard to read, so I'm going to explain it a little bit. This is a bed rug that is from Burlington, dated between 1820 and 1840. And it has, instead of the kind of tufted or looped pile that you might that we see on some of the other rugs that we'll talk about a little later today, this has a number of knots. It's almost like it's been crocheted. And these two little marks that you see down here are initials, T and R. We know this came through the Richardson family in Burlington. So with no further ado, we're going to go back to the Pizzagalli Center, and we're going to talk a little bit about design with Awen. One of the reasons that we wanted to sort of have this conversation in person with this item is that you get a real sense when you're sitting with it. It's like having a banana for scale, right? Like you see how big this is compared to a human being.
Yes.
And I think a lot when we talk about historic items, we talk about what they would have been like when they were used. And so I think about an interior in Vermont in the very early 19th century. So bed rugs would have gone on the very top of all of the fittings for a bed. So when we talk about a bed in 1810, we're talking about a number of layers. Usually a bed is being sort of supported by ropes or leather straps. On top of that, there'd be a big, almost like a giant pillowcase filled with straw often. On top of that sort of base straw layer, you would have another sort of large case that had feathers in it, sometimes goose feathers. If you were really well-to-do, you might have another sort of down layer on top of that. That was only in the fanciest homes. You'd have a series of bolsters that were filled with feathers or other materials like horsehair. And you think about a bed as a place that you inhabit. This wasn't a flat ceiling mattress like what we have, right? This was sort of a lumpy, bumpy zone that had all of these layers of insulation to keep you warm in the coldest part of winter. This bed rug would have gone over all of those layers as like a heavy weighted blanket on the very top. I think a lot about lying underneath this and all of that weight and warmth that seals in. Also, what the light in that interior would have shown. And so you're talking about these different textures in the pile of this, right? The difference in the sort of dark and light materials, the difference in the texture. Down near the bottom of the rug, there are some areas that are still sort of cut and a little floofier than the items up here where your hands would have touched.
Definitely. And also in terms of thinking about how the materials are acting in a more technical sense and serving this purpose of warmth, right? So the ground fabric, where we see it exposed, is woven from thicker yarns. And then the pile is woven from these thin hand-spun yarns that are often overspun and create an interesting texture. So you're getting, the layer of warmth from that ground fabric. And then the smaller yarns are giving the artist more control in the design and sort of creating crisp edges. But that pile is also adding, pockets of air, which are insulating and just adding more warmth. So this would have been very cozy.
Very cozy indeed.
Yeah, I kind of want one.
I mean, so when I think about making this and I think about how it would have been used in the home, some of our viewers are probably thinking, wow, that's very similar to a hooked rug. And hooked rugs in North America, really, we see most of them in collections emerge in the 19th century. So this tradition of making bed rugs actually precedes making hooked rugs.
Yes.
But there are a lot of very similar techniques. Rugs generally use a much coarser, more brittle ground fabric, but it's that same action of pulling loops through and creating sort of texture on top.
Yeah, and there are different strategies even across this specific rug. So there are ways you can use a needle to pull the thread up through the fabric and then back through another spot. Whereas in a hooked method, when you're hooking, you're taking imagine a crochet hook, and you're pulling two layers of that yarn, two strands of that yarn right up through with that hook. And so in that case, both of those yarns travel through the same hole in the ground fabric. But when you use a needle, it travels up through one hole and down through another.
Oh, well, and that has a real effect on pliability in the end, right?
Yes, and sort of surface qualities and how it ages over time and all sorts of things.
Wow, that's really interesting. So anything else? Oh, there is one thing that I kind of was curious about. We have been talking about this sort of ground fabric, and it differs, the ground material differs in all of the materials that we have all the rugs that we have in our collection. But this one, can you talk with us a little bit about how the ground fabric is oriented?
Sure. So when you think of a textile this scale and the date of 1810, you have to keep in mind, the technology that would have been available to the folks making these things. And so this is an extremely wide textile, and looms just were not available of this width. And so it was much more practical to have looms that were smaller, especially imagine having a loom about this wide and then passing the weft yarns back and forth this way, right? That makes sense with our bodies. It's about the width of our arms. And it happens on this textile. This is actually two pieces of fabric that are seamed in the middle. So each one was about that wide.
Wow.
Which would have been in relationship to the looms that were used to produce that ground fabric.
That's fabulous. All right. And we're coming back. Excellent. You guys, the technology. All right. So I wanted to share a little picture of a loom to give everyone an idea of the kind of scale we're talking about for manufacture. So this is a former student of the Winter program in Early American Culture who got to go down to Colonial Williamsburg and try out some of their hand looms. And so I just wanted to show this so you have a sense of how big a loom that someone like Mary Comstock might have used would have been. So get this sort of in your mind. Think about how your arms go around it. Think about how you sit. It's a full body kind of experience to weave something. I also wanted to share a little bit about the construction of a historic bed. I spent some time in that last clip describing it, but sometimes pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? So the bed that you see here, it is strung together. You can see the sort of ropes here. This was actually in the galleries at Winter for many years. You can see this bottom layer of straw, sort of in almost a really big pillowcase down here. Then there's a layer, and these are all wrapped in mattress ticking. So a layer of goose feathers in here. And then you can see in the cutaway, there are layers of linen and woolen blankets on top of this. In the back, you have bolsters, so a down bolster here, another feather bolster back here. Honestly, it looks pretty comfy. And it would be on top of all of this that you would place a bed rug in the coldest months of the winter. So while we are talking about texture and materiality, I wanted to show some close-ups of the Mary Comstock rug and some of the other bed rugs that some institutions have sort of put together really good detail shots of. So here you see that woven diamond twill ground material that Mary Comstock's rug is made on top of. And you get a good sense here too of some of these overspun materials right here, how they create a kind of shine. And then some of the pile that has been sort of abraded away, which tends to absorb a little more light. Here's another picture of that rug with the sort of center urn, if you will. And again, you see differences in color, you see differences in pile, this really rich brown pile in the lower right-hand corner. You get a real sense of its sort of heft and how it would just sort of feel, it doesn't feel felted, but it feels substantial in your hands. This is one of those flowers that Awen was referring to earlier. And then again, just a little variation in terms of all of this. To understand how this bed rug now compares to others, I thought I'd share some other pictures. So this is a bed rug that is in the Brooklyn Museum's collection. I showed it to you earlier. It's from 1790, but the reason I'm showing it to you now is the backside. So the Brooklyn Museum very kindly has this picture up in their database, and you can see here that this woven twill material is seamed down the center, and these little dots that you see are where the maker of this bed rug, okay, we'll toggle back. So that's the surface. Those little dots are where the maker has taken the woolen threads, gone down with the needle through the base material, and then pulled it back up to create a kind of loft on top. So this again is that bed rug that is at Colonial Williamsburg that was from Long Island. But here is a detail of the decoration. So take that in, right? It's almost like crewel work. So woolen threads, again, this is the overall. And here's a detail of that. And you can see just how much work was put into this in terms of creating that overall design. This had to have taken just so many hours, so many hours. This is another bed rug. This one is from 1773. This is from Connecticut. And the reason I'm showing it to you is because we have beautiful details from the staff at Winter of its stitches. And so here you see those thick woolen threads with the date. And again, with some of the flowers. So you can sort of see how those threads were pulled up. They're just really thick and luscious, aren't they? So this bed rug, also at Colonial Williamsburg, but this one was from New London, Connecticut, 1776. Busy year. Here are some details of that. And the reason I'm showing this to you is you can see over here the looped pile and then the cut pile. And so you can sort of get a good sense of the different surface effects that the maker was creating when thinking out the design of this bed rug. This is that great example from Colonial Williamsburg that I love so much with the almost flame stitch pattern on the sides. This is a detail of that. Again, you can see here the kind of brittle ground underneath all of this. And all of this just, it's almost an ombre, right? With the sort of really deep, rich navy blues and almost cerulean here that fades to a lighter, almost white. This bed rug I really love this bed rug. So this is going to be up for the entire 2027 season. This is in Shelburne Museum's collection. It is dated 1819. And this one in particular is, let's see, what do we know about this? It's by Dorothy Harris Seabury, dated in 1819. We're not sure where it's from. But to me, this bed rug looks like if Mary Mako and Missoni had a really hefty baby. It is huge and it is in spectacular condition. So I'm really excited to spend some time with Awen looking at this bed rug. But before we do that, I want to share a couple detail shots of this. So here you see that big central flower with some of that cut pile decoration. These oranges are almost a slight ombre effect. It kind of looks like the 1960s has emerged, but it was, many, many years before that, 1819. This is a detail of that top edge of this bed rug that has Dorothy's name as well as the date. And this is a sort of detail shot of that really wonderful sawtooth border. I am totally smitten with this item. If I had this, it would be out for someone to see all the time. And it is remarkable to me that it has survived for so long in such great condition. So now we're going to go back to the last little bit, which may answer a question you have about how we're hanging the rug, and I'll see you shortly. So there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about with you today. Some of you at home may be thinking to yourself, wow, I don't think I've ever seen this out on display. So this is an item that we've had in our collection for a long time, but there are some inherent challenges to displaying textiles like bed rugs. So we like to see them here at Shelburne Museum. There are some spaces where we have slant walls that are set up for displaying quilts and those kinds of things, but partly because of its composition, this is a really heavy object, right? So for the exhibition, Buried and Alive, we are going to feature 3 bed rugs over the course of 2 seasons. So we'll have a kind of rotation to take stress off of these items. Awen, can you tell us a little bit about the system that we're using to safely hang them?
Absolutely. So fortunately, over the past few decades, there have been some really wonderful conservation treatments done already to preserve and care for these bed rugs. And for instance, this bed rug, when I reviewed it for inclusion in this exhibit, had already been lined with a cotton fabric. And so there is a support layer underneath that this is stitched down to by hand. And that is going to distribute the weight more evenly and just take some of the stress off of the wool ground fabric. So that's one element of the care when we're thinking about vertical display for these. The other thing is going to be how we attach the textile to a support board. Okay. And in this case, we're going to use a Velcro mount. And actually, on this specific rug, we're going to have 3 pieces of Velcro, 3 lengths, 1 along the top, and then 2 along each side. And so that's going to ensure that for this large textile, for its width, that weight is also being distributed evenly, and it has lots of locations that can hold the weight of all of this wool.
Yeah. Oh, that is terrific. I have to say, I am so pleased that I get to work at an institution where we have a conservation lab.
Well, I am also so excited that 3 of these bed rugs are going to be on display. I should mention, we're going to be rotating them. So during the first year, there will be 2 bed rugs on display. And we're displaying these 2 for brief periods of time because of their condition, because they're a little bit more degraded and just a little bit more fragile. But in the second year of the show, we'll be displaying quite a large bed rug, which is very exciting. And it's in great condition. And I'm excited that we get to keep that up for a whole visitor season.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's it from here for now. If you like what you've seen, we hope that you will come join us at Varied and Alive when we open in May. The exhibition will be up through October, and then we'll have that 3rd bed rug up for next season as well. Thank you so much, and back to the webinar. Okay, so in the interest of keeping us moving, so we have some time for questions, I've just got 2 more images to share. They're for the final 5th section of the exhibition, Varied and Alive. And to wrap us up tonight, I'm going to talk about our section, Afterlives. We have a selection of items in our sort of 5th section of the show that examine our traditions surrounding death and dying and remembrance. The object that you see on the screen right now is actually a grave rubbing that was done by Shelburne resident Betty Emery. Betty passed away in 2016, but she had been remembering those who had passed long before her for many years. We have a number of these really fabulous graphite rubbings of gravestones from around New England by Betty. And so those are in the exhibition. The last image I will leave you with is of our Millerite banner. You may have already seen the lecture preview that my colleague Corey Rogers has provided. But at this time next week, so Thursday, April 2nd at 6 p.m., Corey Rogers is going to take you through a journey toward the end of the world with this banner. It was a painted banner made by someone who was part of the Millerite sect. They believed that the end of the world was coming in 1843, and this fabulous banner had all kinds of portents about how that was going to happen. So I'm going to leave it at that. I am going to hand it back to Kat, who's going to help manage some questions.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we'll do that.
Katie, thank you so much for that. And we have some really exciting questions. I can tell that people were inspired by what you said. So I want to start. I'm going to combine 2 questions. And the start question is, these are amazing and wonderful presentations. So I just want to make sure you get those flowers. But the question is, what do you think was behind the expression of these beautiful pieces? I can't help but connect the dates and locations. What do you think the artists were trying to express? And then I also want to add, because we had somebody who posited a kind of a theory around that, which said Comstock's bed rug design really reminds me of Eastern North American, Native American beaded wool bags. Could Native American floral designs have also been a design source? So, kind of thinking about design inspiration, and do you know if there were any sources of that design inspiration for these?
That's a great question. So, the research so far has indicated that a lot of this, most of the inspiration for these kinds of bed rugs was coming from imported textiles that were either part of the China trade. So items coming from Asia. We see a lot of ceramics and not glassware, but spices and silks, those kinds of things. Or things from the Far East, like India. And so there would have been a number of items in a colonial or early Republican home that played with those kinds of design characteristics. It's a really interesting suggestion about indigenous items that might have influenced these. At the time, in most of the regions where this was made, there had been, and there remains to be, heavy, large communities of indigenous people, right? But I don't know how much of that is translating over. What I do wonder about is since these are such heavy textiles, they get used in the dead of winter, right? When it's so cold. Um, Maybe it's just that I'm hoping for spring, but they seem to me like these sort of exuberant wishes for the season to come.
Mm.
Is that too much? I don't know. That's where my mind goes with them.
Lovely. No, I think that's right. And I think it's hard to know, if there's not documentation of that, but the influences come from all over, and there's vibrancy in them. Just this idea of this boldness of the botanicals is beautiful. I'm going to combine a few questions because we have some questions about kind of the function of them and how they exist. And so, one of the quick questions was, how do you know how long one of these might have taken?
So a long time. These were not items that were manufactured industrially. And a number of the examples that we have were on what appear to be, like Mary Comstock's rug, homespun textiles. So
Mm.
you could get those in a variety of places, but I think I mentioned this earlier, the idea of a colonial place. The idea of a colony is that you create raw materials, you also use finished products. But people living in North America were prohibited by law to produce finished textiles at any scale before the revolution. And so uh, I think when you look at these items, you have to think about them as being made at home, which means you've got someone at home who has enough spare time to make these. Something that's interesting is that these are not items that are being made by very young women. When we look at needlework in general, like silk work or samplers, many times those kinds of items are made by very young girls who are under the tutelage of schoolmistresses or other kinds of teachers, whether they're at home or at boarding school. These bed rugs are being made by older women. And what I mean by that is at least 25 years of age in general. I don't think I've seen one by someone where we can associate the name and the date and they were younger than 24 or 25. And that is not unimportant information. It means that these are people who are probably in established households where not only do they have the time to make these, but they have the resources to acquire the materials, which are not cheap. And they have the space to lay all of this out.
Mm.
It's not like a piece quilt, right, where you can make like a block here and a block there. And then sort of, as my colleague Pam Weeks would say, potholder them together. This bed rug was a large undertaking. Even Mary
Mm.
Comstock's rug, when it started with those two lengths of woven material, those were not small. So having the room and space to sort of lay that out and work on it is important.
So we have a couple questions about just how it was used. And so one of them is, so you would sleep under it, not on top of it with blankets on top of you. And then we also have, just a comment that sounds like the weight of the bed rug would flatten out kind of a lumpy layers of feather and horsehair. And then somebody asked about, did women make these to be part of their hope chest or as an element of dowry or part of home education? And then the final thought here was, along with that, was another layer of blankets put on top of the bed rug, or did you sleep under? So how was it used on the actual bed, and was it part of a dowry?
Okay, so these are really great questions. I'm going to speak to two of them, and then you can remind me if I haven't gotten you right. So the first question is the placement of the bed rug. So in theory, it goes over everything. It is the top layer. It is the layer of the sandwich. If you're going to make a grilled cheese, you're smushing it down so that everything heats up and cooks underneath, right? That's maybe a bad comparison. But the point is, it is heavy, it is weighted, and it is sealing in all of that heat, right? That is really important to know. Something else I think that might be worthwhile to bring up for this answer is that, our beds today, we make them in the morning and get into them at night, but we don't take the sheets off every day. In the colonial era and in the sort of early 19th century, often beds would be fully taken apart and put back together. This helped to keep them from, getting bugs. This helped to keep them a little more sanitary. And so you've got to imagine these things sort of constantly being in flux. Bedrugs were items that you used to sort of show off the fact that you had the time, you had the materials, you had the finances to have something like this in your home, and you liked something that was beautiful, right? Like they didn't have to be made with floral motifs, but you chose that because you wanted to beautify your interior space. The other question that you brought up about hope chests is one, and I almost included this and I didn't quite. So I'm glad whoever asked this question. Um, when we think about material culture in the Connecticut River Valley, there's another form that comes up over and over again, and it's one of my favorites. It's the Hadley chest. Hadley chests are like the wooden version of the bedrug. They have this incredible Mannerist design. They would have been painted, we know from wood analysis that many of them were polychromed. Much of that paint was removed during the 20th century with early colonial revival collectors. But when you bring up the idea of the hope chest and a dowry, those Hadley chests were usually carved with their owner's maiden name initials. And they are one of the best ways that we have of tracking these early sort of New England lineages that are, again, in the Connecticut River Valley, the same places that these bedrugs are being made. Now, from a material perspective, I'm not sure that you could actually fit a bedrug into a Hadley chest. Like, they don't fold that well. They're stiffer than you imagine. And for those of you who are curious what it would be to lie under one, this is a question that is really occupying my mind too. Poor Kat has had to listen to this a lot. Maybe sometime in the next 2 years, we'll do some experiments safely with the help of our conservators to find out just what that would be like. But I love those sort of experiential kinds of questions because it isn't something that we have a lot of context for today.
Mm. We are at time, so I just want to honor that. And before I'll see if we have another question. I just want to make sure. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I know some people have to leave and so hop off. I want to thank Katie and Isa for being here with me. I also really want to thank Awen, who worked with Katie on part of this presentation and who also made it possible. Katie and Awen working together, making it possible that these can be on display, and our exhibition team for Varied and Alive. And then as always, with everything we do, I want to thank our donors and members who allow us to do this type of programming for free. And so thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. I just also want to offer something because there are a few comments and questions that we might not be able to get to. Please feel free to send some of those questions to education@shelburnmuseum.org. And we can make sure that we get some of those answers. I know there's a few we're not able to answer right now, but I just want to highlight one last comment before we end, which is somebody saying, having dabbled in embroidery, rug hooking and tapestry, loom weaving, this presentation is so wonderful as it sets up bed rugs for setting the stage for other fiber arts. And so we're so glad that you're seeing this kind of lineage of fiber arts and what's leading one into another. And thank you for sharing your experience with us. And I'm so glad that this has been a meaningful presentation for you as kind of helping understand that evolution of fiber arts over time. We are past time, and so I want to thank you all. Please, again, that is education@shelburnmuseum.org. If you have anything that you would like to ask us that didn't get answered today, please feel free to be in touch with us. And then tons of just enthusiastic thanks in the comments, Katie, for this presentation. It really seems like a lot of people have learned a ton about something that wasn't on their radar or that was, and that they've learned new things about it. And so we hope to see you at Varied and Alive again. We will be here again next week at this time with Corey Rogers talking about some of the other highlights of the Varied and Alive exhibit. And we absolutely hope you join us at the museum to see this exhibit in person. There are things none of us have ever seen in an exhibition while our time is here. So we're really thrilled for this exhibition as well. Thank you all so much. Katie, thank you. It's always such a joy to work with you and learn from you. Thank you all so much for coming, and we can't wait to see you at the museum. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Bye-bye.